the Valley Current.
So scholarly. He said, well, if you read the book 2030, and I confused it for a second with a book I had just finished. It was called 2032. And I said, were you talking about the book about nuclear war? He said, no, I'm talking about the book that talks about by 2030, there is an anti-aging drug and people are living to 150. And it goes through the ramifications of these old people and what they're doing that's hurting the incentives for the younger people to try to actually, build a career. And he said, you got to read that book. We were not on a long enough drive for him to give me all the details. He said, you really need to read that book. And you know what? I instantly while I was in the car, I downloaded the Audible version of that book. I think I listened to the 7 hours of that within like the next couple of days. And I said, he was right. That's an Uber driver.
Yeah.
Imagine the Uber driver has become like a mentor of someone that's I think I'm pretty well read. I spend a lot of time reading. I've got a pretty wide range of stuff that I do. I never heard of this book. It was done in 2011 by a guy named Arthur Brooke, who's actually apparently a pretty famous actor. I didn't know any of this stuff. I'll send you the link. I think you need to listen to it or read it or do something with it, because I think it'll have an effect on the way you think about how this evolution of incentives will end up working. Like people will have a different way. Like right now, people like to have lots of followers, right? But is it followers with meaning? Or like, what does it represent? Is it something that really matters, or is it just a set of numbers, right? What is it? But I agree with you. It's changing. It's changing the way people think of lawyers too.
People do. You can see how I dress, right? I don't dress to impress.
You look great. You look great.
I don't dress to impress, but people spend a lot of money to impress, whether it's their cars, their houses, whatever, to build their status. And you might say, well, and I say to myself, well, that's okay. They want to be well thought of, but surely there are better ways of doing that, And one of the things that you will learn when you read book 4 is, and it comes again from Aristotle, is a dead simple thing, which is everybody has something they're a little bit better at than most of the people around them.
People call that in business your edge. Your edge. Like literally, seriously, this is when you talk to people on Wall Street, they say, so what's that guy's edge? And I'll tell you, it can be something as simple as, and I've seen this, there are people that can read upside down, and they literally can look across the table. David, I've seen this in negotiations. They can look across the table, and they've got like vision. They've got like X-ray vision, and they can read the notes that their counterparty, and the counterparty doesn't have the foggiest idea that all the confidential information is upside down. I've seen this in action. And you go and take a break in a negotiation, and this is an ethical issue for a lawyer, by the way. It's a footnote. And the client who can read upside down, I've had several of them. They say they're going to cave at $22 billion or whatever the deal is. They're going to cave at that number. I said, where do you get that? He said, trust me. I'm reading. They say, I'm reading the room. But what they're doing is they're reading the notes that are in the friggin' notes that are right across the table. That's their edge. That's
their edge. But Jack, the point I'm making is your cleaner. You have a cleaner?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a cleaner. And she is Brazilian.
Yes.
And she's only 26, 27. And I checked out my theory the other day. And so I started to talk to Anna. And it turns out she's an amazing photographer.
Okay.
And she shows me her pictures. And they're not just celebrity crap,
Right.
They're really interesting. And then when you talk to her about the pictures, she talks to you philosophy. And she's uneducated, but she's seen something. And to me, that's what I'm talking about, because I'm more interested in the edge that ordinary folk have got.
Yes.
And when you're in a community, okay, here's the picture. You have a community of 100 people. If you can find the edge in all of them, what happens to their self-respect? Their self-respect goes up. Not only have they found the edge where they're pleased with, but other people are looking at them and they're saying, hey, he's really useful.
Yes.
Or she's really useful. And that's how the community builds its a new way of valuing things. Because actually what you're valuing there is using your knowledge, using your edge to be recognized. Nothing wrong with being recognized, but be recognized for the wrong thing, right? The right things and not the wrong ones.
Right. And
money hasn't come into that conversation, because what I have 3 level. You'll find that I'm giving you spoilers, but in book 4, the thing called the 3 A's. Everybody is an assister. They assist. Everybody, no matter who they are, they do some sort of assistant role. Everybody finds an advisor role, and finds an authorizer role. Everybody. Now, obviously, it varies depending on what level. But the point about that is it's like a motor driving through the community and saying to people, hey, you're not so bad. You're good at that, and that makes people feel good. And that's what we do anyway. When we meet someone on the street or we meet them, you want to praise them. You want to say, hey, yeah, that's good. And so that's the type of thing.
Right, but let me give you the underlying theory for what drives edge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So there was a guy, and I'll send you the link. He recently died, sadly. I met him years ago at Stanford. He was teaching at the University of Chicago. He's got a very difficult name to pronounce. It's Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I think he's a Hungarian. He came over to the United States as a news reporter. He came over like working for Chicago. Yeah, he wrote the book called Flow, Flow.
Yeah. I know that guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
The edge gets driven off of people moving towards flow. If you look what happens when you have challenge versus skill.
Yeah.
And you recognize you have talent in a certain area, like a skier.
Yeah.
And go down a black diamond ski slope.
Yeah.
And eventually no longer fall, right? You got the book. You got it there, right?
I've got this book, and I know this guy. His name's Tim Jackson.
Yes.
And he quotes that guy throughout the chapter, which is called Flow.
Yes. That's
the flow is very serious.
That could be that concept of flow could be rewritten as finding your edge. Yeah. Because when you can put yourself in a flow state, as you do as you write these books, I'm sure you lose track of time. You get deeply immersed.
Sure.
Your skill is being improved because you're challenging yourself. The fact that you already, and there's a graphic. Yeah, there's a graphic in there too. Yeah, I see it. But there's a graphic. There's a graphic that kind of best summarizes what flow is.
I haven't read the book yet, but I've got it on my list to read.
Yeah.
Hey, isn't that amazing? He wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience.
That's
and
it.
The cost and benefit of consuming.
Yes.
Materialism and the evolution of consciousness. So his 3 books that I've got on my list, I must read, because you're absolutely right. This thing I've to talk, which again, I must say to you, it comes from Aristotle. This idea, we've all got potential, we've all got something. If you get into that thing you're good at, it then just becomes natural. You begin to flow.
It becomes like breathing air. It's so ingrained.
Jack, it's like the conversation between you and I now.
Yes.
This is flow, because I'm really getting something from this conversation.
Yes.
I'm saying, I'm so glad I met this guy. It's really 2 similar minds.
Right. I'm putting on the screen a picture from a whiteboard that I did many, many years ago. I just found it by searching the word skill. And you see that.
What's the vertical axis?
The vertical axis is challenge. If you have a high degree of challenge and a low degree of skill, you're going to be in this area of anxiety and boredom because you have too much skill for the amount of challenge. The challenge is very low. When the challenge is very, very high, and the skill is high, you start to feel this flow. And what happens is as you grow, like when you first ski, you fall and you go from green to blue because you learn. It's actually all about the speed of learning and it's the speed of incorporating improvements, right? So think of it as critical thinkers. They often will challenge themselves. You do it every day. And then your skill improves. Yeah. The skill of your writing improves. The skill of your thinking improves. This period of time, over time, all of us should be developing some skill and getting better and better at it. So some people know how to sharpen knives, to go back to the beginning of our conversation. Some people really know how to make money. Some people really know how to reach people, how to communicate. Some people know how to manipulate a Zoom session so that this little graphic comes up quickly enough to drive a discussion, right? No, seriously. No, let me tell you something. No, I got to tell you something. They are trying to train lawyers to get good at doing what we just did together in talking about this subject and putting a graphic up, because a lot of lawyers can't do it. Yeah. A lot of lawyers can't manipulate the screen fast enough. And even mediators who are specially trained lawyers to do mediations, they have to get good at it. And oftentimes they can't, and they need to have an assistant. So these mediation firms exist with lots of what you might call bullshit jobs for people to press a couple of keys. Next slide, that sort of thing. As opposed to what you should be able to do with Katerina, right? Katerina, find that graphic that has skill versus challenge and designates the flow channel where people feel immersed. And that's the edge. That's the edge. That's the edge that people have. And I've been thinking about this for a while.
Yeah. And what you need, and as I say, the important person is, in my view, the important person is the cleaner, right? Because I want to start, if you can get this working at that level, so it's someone with lower levels of skill, but nevertheless they've still got potential, but they don't believe in themselves because they're being crushed by other people. And then you lift up their level of drive or challenges, whatever you want. And what I find, what I would want to do on this, I'd love you to send that graphic to me, by the way.
Of course.
Is because what happens, no matter whether you're have that modest skill and modest challenge, or high skill and high challenge, is you enter into something at your level which is called creativity.
Yes.
As soon as flow, for me, is that you've unleashed creativity, and once you do that, you then come back to another very big point within my book series, is the fear of death. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
But one of the ways that you overcome, and I think we all have a fear of death, whatever we may think, it happens. And one of the most important ways of managing that, putting it aside, I'm going to die sometimes, is to be creative. If you're creative and you're getting on with things, you look forward to tomorrow. You don't look forward, tomorrow is a day, oh God, another day. You're thinking, no, I can advance that idea. So it's really, when I talk about people and get them to realize their potential, what I'm really trying to get them to do is to be blessed with the experience of creativity. Because, it comes in many, many, many different forms. You're absolutely right. Your Uber driver was a guy who probably is fairly creative.
I asked him, what he said to me? I said to him, why are you driving for Uber? You should be teaching. So I gave up that career. I got a retirement check from that. And so I said to him, so why do you do it? He said, I just like talking to people. Yeah. I get community from it. He said, I only work 4 hours a day. I get out of the house 4 hours a day. And he's got this down to a science. I should just drop a footnote here. He's using a Chevy Bolt, B-O-L-T. It's totally electric Chevy. It's a small car. Yeah. And he said, by the way, I'm kind of a multimillionaire. I can afford a better car, but the Bolt, he said, the Bolt gets the best miles for the charge. Like basically the charge goes 250 miles. but the recharge is fast to bring it back to 250. He said, I tried a Tesla. It takes longer to charge. The Bolt is cheaper. The Bolt can be bought used. He buys them used. It can be bought used for like $15,000. He said, you run this car for like 150,000 miles, you get your $15,000 worth. He's got it down to where he's actually making money. All these other Uber drivers are burning a lot of gas. He's got a solar system on his roof. He plugs in the car to recharge it off the solar system. The guy's really smart.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody has a niche. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
Even 8 billion people. I mean, there is a caveat to all this conversation, right?
Yes.
And you know what Maslow's triangle looks like. You know what I mean?
Course. Yes, of course.
And the
hierarchy of needs. Yes.
Yeah. We're talking about the people at the upper part of that triangle whose security...
The self-actualized, yes.
No, not that far, but we're going to get there in a minute, but the people above that line where they have security, shelter, and sustenance.
Yes.
You're below that line, all this conversation is a hell of a lot more difficult. And that's the tragedy of the world, that, probably over 40% are now well below that line. So what we've got to do is the people above that, like you and I are above that, we've got to make sure that we find the thing that we're good at, we create opportunities and wealth that can do something about lifting some of those people up above that cutoff. Because below that cutoff, you're really fucked.
So this gets into how bad the school system is, because the school system should be totally driven around helping people find their edge, or what we're calling find flow, generate creativity, move up the Maslow hierarchy from an intellectual point of view. Because look, food is more or less available, water is available, shelter is available, at least in first world countries, and rapidly in second and third world countries. You have visualized something that I think many people that are trying to build the future of the augmented reality systems, which are like 5 or 6 different players now. It's not just Apple, it's not just Meta. It really started with Google and Google Glasses. It actually started years ago with a company that I helped start called VPL Research. Jaron Lanier. They were the original inventors back then.
Yeah.
And that was like 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so these people are imagining a world that's very different than the world we have today, because the world we have today still assumes that people are going to actually interact individually across the table or in a meeting and the like. And we still pretty much have that model. But the future world may be a very different world, given the amount of augmentation and the amount of intelligence that's behind the augmentation, right? That's your point about Katerina.
I don't buy any of this stuff that says machine intelligence will exceed human intelligence by 2060, right? That's this Kurzweil guy. I think that it's one of those judgment calls. You often get judgment calls from me. I think it's a load of bollocks.
Yes.
And what I don't think is bollocks is an alternative form of intelligence called machine intelligence, which we're completely in control of. I mean, it's, of course you can do something malign, but you just code it that you assist Katerina, you do not insist. Katerina will refuse. If I said to Katerina, tell me about Jack, how's Jack getting on? She'll say, hey, I can't talk about anybody else. And that's really important, that she's not allowed to discuss another person. If I say, what about the folk in San Francisco? How are they getting on after the earthquake?
Yes.
She'll jump into it. But she cannot, she has all the information about you because you have a Katerina, but it's coded deep. It's completely impossible for her to talk about you individually. And at the end of the day, you may say to me this, hey, supposing Katerina sees you're walking towards a brick wall or the edge of a cliff, And she says, don't, I would like to advise you, there is a brick wall, and you ignore it. Then you hit the brick wall,
Right.
or you fall. So in other words, you are still in control of your fate. The only great thing is that you will do a load of less stupid things and a lot more incredibly well-informed things, because she is there, if you're willing, to say, well, I would like to tell you this motorway has got some real obstacles in front of it, and you come off onto a slip road and you go round it. You will be better informed, you'll be safer, but you'll be a hell of a lot smarter.
Right.
I think the consequences for democracy of having something like that, if you work it through in your head, in terms of information no longer being a source of power, then that community of 5 million on the 9 intra-oceanic hubs, wow, they're a bit like we think about Ashkenazi Jews. There is something, every Ashkenazi Jew I've known, I have an extremely good friend who's an Ashkenazi Jew, and I don't mind admitting, I think he's actually a lot cleverer than me. And when I go to his family, they invite me there for a Jewish do. Their kids are bright. They're all bright, and I don't mind that. I don't object to that. In fact, I love being with them because they're so bright.
Yes.
But the point is, and this is what doesn't come out in book 5 because I won't have written, but in future books, there's going to be an issue on these people living on this 5 million living on these intra-oceanic hubs and having Katerina augmenting them. They're just going to be smarter. They're going to be far ahead. And that of course, is if there is another book series, if I don't drop down dead, that will be something I've got to think about. And already, I've got an idea in 5 that ambassadors go out from Phillips Quay to begin to liaise, begin to talk.
Let me just challenge and ask you on this notion that everyone's information source is equally available. Essentially, everyone has access to electricity. Everyone has access to Katerina. Everyone has access to superintelligence, like what now is being called in Silicon Valley, AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. The code name, by the way, the code name that's been released by OpenAI is Orion. The actual code name just got released this week, Orion. And there was a false report that Orion is coming out this year. And OpenAI very quickly said, no, it's not. We're not doing that this year, which kind of implies maybe they're teasing us. So Orion is the code name. OpenAI is growing by leaps and bounds. The user base is growing. There's obviously some competition, but basically they're the front runner. And the business keeps, becoming more and more successful, attracting more and more smart people and so on. Microsoft has a big stake and it's affecting the Microsoft business, but that's all a build up to this point. Don't you think that regardless of how accessible the basic Katerina is, or even the super Katerina is, there will always be an elite who will say, well, I am talking to some of the best thinkers around the world who are programming the next Katerina, and they've given me super access. And there'll always be this Bill Gates has a slight advantage. Zuckerberg has a slight advantage. The billionaire, I call it the billionaire advantage. If you're a billionaire, you can afford to have access to the most amazing minds. They may not be as amazing as yours and ours are at the moment, because we're like 2 people out of 8 billion that are spending some time on a Sunday talking about the future of the world in the context of the segmented world that you already created, standing on the shoulders of essentially a petroleum company, or if I'm remembering it correctly, some sort of energy company that was trying to figure out what the price of oil and gas and the like would look like, 40, 50 years from now. And you figured out a way to make it more generic and more applicable in a very, very, very easy to understand way compared to a lot of the other stuff that you might read on this subject. And I'm just in some ways saying, I'm not sure it totally flattens as much as you may say, but think about it, because I do think at some level, there's always somebody out there that's going to say, but you haven't talked to so-and-so who actually is combining water with wine with some other chemicals, and all of a sudden you can live to 150. You just have to have the right, formula for it. And that's a new creation, right?
Yeah. I get your point. There will be rivals. You've got what they call the hub. If you remember reading in book 1 and book 2, the phrase "the hub Commonwealth" comes up.
Yes.
The hub Commonwealth are the 9 intra-oceanic webs hubs, and they're going to hold about 5 million people. And remember, this is being organized by allied answers. And Allied Answers is like a Google and Microsoft and a few more combined. They are a mega technical organization. I believe Nick O'Grady in 2035 sees the light. He realized, and remember, I don't necessarily agree, Jack, with the scenario in my fictional book series. I'm keeping an open mind. I don't know what's going to happen, but I've taken a particular outcome. And it's an outcome where the stagnant world, right, where there's low cooperation and there's low focused innovation, hits us very hard by 2035. And Nick O'Grady basically says it isn't going to work. It isn't going to work trying to change the world as it is. We're going to have to take ourselves away from it and create, as it were, a template in these 9 oceanic things that others might be able to follow.
Yes.
Now, you've raised a very good point, which is, well, hang on, but other things will be going on. Maybe others, Chinese or people from Singapore, maybe creating something similar. Yeah, it could be true. All I'm saying is that the whole aim of this Hub Commonwealth will be to share practices with anybody who wants to come along. And if you've got 5 million people and you're going to attract a lot of very, bright people because of the nature of the community, they're going to be innovating like mad against each other. They're going to be all the time wanting this recognition, not money, but recognition.
Right.
They want to be the person that found the solution. So it's going to be like an intense ball of innovative activity.
Yes.
You may be right. I mean, all they won't be doing is doing stupid things like fighting one another, and that comes back to Methuen Way. And they won't be doing stupid things like trying to go to Mars or, wasting natural resources like Musk does at the moment.
Well, Musk is sort of a playboy, so he's got kind of this vision of making the society you're describing on Mars, which is crazy if you think about the potential that he could do 10 such societies on Earth. Like he could create a model for what he's spending to get to Mars. He can create a model for what could happen here on Earth. But let's end with this idea, because you spurred this idea. If you look at what these billionaires are doing, Larry Ellison has bought his own island. Yeah. Think about this. In Hawaii. The guy who started Salesforce, he bought a portion of Maui. Like literally, they are using their billionaire status to buy up secluded areas that they could basically demarcate almost as though they're the sovereign, almost as though they become the controlling party. Now, if this degree of billionaire status continues, we will probably see the beginning of what you're describing, where they will invite certain people into what would be called, if we were in Israel, a kibbutz or some sort of community, right? Yeah. To say, hey, I want to test this out. And particularly if we end up through one of these PCZs, permanent conflict zones, of which it seems like we continue to have more and more of them every day, some sort of tactical nuclear weapon that has some fallout in causing a real disaster in the entire northern hemisphere, maybe even the southern hemisphere. I mean, who knows? But people are buying up New Zealand. They're buying up Australia. They're buying up different places that they can do with the wealth that they have as either a plan B or maybe as a retirement plan. Maybe it's their plan A, what they want to do when they get to be a certain age. It's interesting because a lot of them are are worried. I think they're sufficiently worried about what happens in what you would otherwise think of as like a first world country or first world city.
Yeah.
And that to me is a signal that the future may become more and more isolated in terms of people that group together in an isolationist way. Of course, we have that in a way with the current two candidates. You know, one is very much an isolationist, right?
And we should get together on that subject. We should get together after the election.
Yes, absolutely. Because the one thing I take away from this conversation, neither one of these candidates has the foggiest idea of this type of futuristic thinking at all.
Yeah, but one of them can do a lot of harm.
Yes, absolutely. So thanks for spending the time, David. This was really fun, and I love the fact that you've got this vision for this 5-part series. I'm telling you, this is going to be one of the great miniseries that Netflix will ever pay you millions of dollars for. I'm telling you, this is serious.
Jack, this has been so enjoyable. Not only enjoyable, incredibly informative for me.
I found this just by happenstance. It was a lecture I gave at Stanford like 15 years ago.
Really?
And it's on this topic. It's on this topic of what motivates creativity.
Yeah.
15 years ago. And I'm amazed. I looked at it, I said, well, first of all, I looked so great in the suit I was wearing at the time. I was like stunned. My wife, Dr. Lee Suter, said to me, yeah, the suit looks really good. Too bad you can't fit into it anymore. maybe it's like, yeah, I got to keep losing weight. But then the second thing is, I talked for about 90 minutes and I didn't use that many slides, but it was very effective. And I said to myself, you know, there's something to be said about actually going through a chain of logic without using a whole bunch of slides. Like these days, of course, everyone's got a slide every 2 seconds and you're constantly reaching. But I was just in conversation mode with these students. And I have to tell you, I think it's going to help you think about this whole thing about non-monetary motivation. It's going to help you with that. I think it's going to help you. You're going to say, you're going to say there's some interesting ideas in that lecture that I'll send to you that you'll say, you know, I got to, and then the second thing, or maybe the third thing is, you may not remember this, but about 20 years ago, after I won a couple of really big cases, I started a nonprofit that's called the Foundation for Creativity in Dispute Resolution. Now it's actually broader, so it's the Foundation for Creativity. And a lot of what the foundation is studying is what is the spark that actually creates a new innovation. Like a new innovation can be a mediator trying to settle a case and seeing an angle or a new edge. And it turns out that a lot of it is just waiting for the right idea to take hold. And you have to be patient. And there's a good book on this by this guy named Rick Rubin. It's called The Creative Way. This guy really does, it's really worth listening to him because he reads his own book on Audible. I'll send you the link for his book.
What I would say on that, Jack, is that my view on creativity through my experience is, first of all, start as early as possible, being honest with yourself and finding the thing you're really good at.
Yes.
And the second thing is let your unconscious mind, what McGilchrist would call the right hemisphere, let it work on it, because it may come in a minute, it may come in an hour, it may come in a year. It doesn't simply matter. But when it does crop up, when some crazy thing crops up, sit down and take it really seriously. Because I don't know about you, I just do not understand how I have my ideas. My ideas are just there. I mean, you know, they just come out.
You have to accept that your neurochemistry firing in your brain operates in different ways. And often it may be like a moment in time. Like I was riding my bike today and I was trying to remember a professor that I had decades ago. I was trying to remember her name. And I just couldn't remember her name. I was just so flummoxed by not being able to remember her name. And all of a sudden, I linked like 5 things together. Remember, I'm riding my bike at about 22 miles an hour. I'm going pretty fast on the bike, which is like 30, it's like 30 kilometers or so an hour. It's pretty fast. And, I'm riding through this, this park, which has some, unfortunately, it's got some pedestrians sometimes that don't get out of the way. So you have to be aware of what you're doing. And so I'm recognizing that, I now remember her name. Her name was Humphreys. And I said, oh, that's exactly right. Her name is Humphreys. And I said, but what was her first name? Because I could now do a search and say, professor teaching in New York City back in the 1970s. I said, that's not going to work. Humphreys is too generic of a name. And I was really struggling to remember her first name. And she had made a real impression on me. And for some reason, I connected some dots. And it finally occurred to me 5 more minutes into the ride. It finally occurred to me, Drew Humphreys. And now I'm going to see if I can find her. And the next time we talk, I'm going to show you the process that worked for me. But it was like this set of associations. I had to take my head back to New York. I had to think back to the time that I was taking that class with her. I had her actual image. I want to say she was probably, young professor. She was probably 10 years older than me at the time, maybe 12. So she's got to be probably in her 80s now if she's still alive. I'm thinking to myself, I probably mildly, I shouldn't say this, but I probably had a crush on her back as a kid.
That's okay.
She was a total, by the way, she was a total Marxist. She was a total left wing, like extreme Marxist. And I was wondering to myself, is she still a Marxist? She might be like a billionaire now. That'd be a very funny.
That's a really good question.
It's a really good question, right? So I'm telling you, when you listen to Rick Rubin, you're going to say, man, that guy, Rick Rubin says, you got to do it for yourself. You got to do the creative stuff for yourself. You're not proving anything to anyone but yourself. You have to please yourself. So you know what? If you want to go with the name Maine, ignore my suggestion of Beyond Phillips Key. Right?
That's still next year. We'll talk about it. Now, listen, one thing I wanted to say just before you go. You and Lee go to the movies?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's Almodovar has got this new film called The Room Next Door.
Okay.
With Tilda Swinton and Julianne Moore.
Is it great?
I think it's one of the, because it's Almodovar, it's brilliantly shot. I think it's one of the most thought-provoking things. It's about death, so don't worry about that. It's so bloody clever the way it's done. And I don't know if you've got it really at Risa or not. It's called The Room Next Door, and I think you really enjoy it. Was it still in the theaters when you saw it, or did you see it on one of the streaming services? No. It's just come out this week.
Okay.
On the movies in the UK.
Okay, in the theater, in the big screen theater. In
the big cinemas, yeah.
Yes.
Please. Did you see The Apprentice with Trump, about Trump?
Yes.
What did you think?
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought it was like the real story of the real guy. But there's another film that he must have commissioned that goes the other way. It's called The Person You Don't Know or something like that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Like they're trying to counterpunch each other. But the series you should watch that's on Apple TV, on Apple or Hulu or one of these is called Disclaimer. It takes place in London. It's like a 5-part series. It's got some famous people in it as well. It's called Disclaimer. It's really well done. It's really very well done. And it shows the power of social media to influence people in different ways. But it's a great a great story and a great, takes place in London. It takes place in a way that you would say, it's very believable.
Let's also swap, as we do our conversation, let's swap movies as well, because what you like, probably I will like as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, mate.
Good talking to you. Take care.
And around the election time, we'll fix something.
Yes, I'll suggest a date. All right. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.